and welcome to No Story Stagnates with me, Ernie Boxall. And it's my honour today to have as a guest Mitali Deypurkaystha.
You almost got it.
Almost. What I'm going to do, Deypurkaystha. I will ask Mitali to tell us who she is, where she is, and what she's doing now. So over to you, Mitali.
Thank you, Ernie. Thank you for having me. So I'm Mitali Deypurkaystha. I am a book coach and book publisher, a business book coach. So I help people write books, but specifically business, non-fiction, business how-to books.
Yes.
And that's what I do. That's what I've been doing for about 8 or 9 months now. I was previously a ghostwriter and a copywriter, and I've moved into helping people write their own books.
And that's an interesting segue in, Mitali, because I was going to say we've known each other for over a year now.
Yes, around about, yeah.
And I remember you saying that you were going to write a book right at the start of when we first, and look at where you are now.
I know. It's been a whirlwind. This last year has been crazy.
Yeah. And so really looking forward to this. And I'm sure my audience will be, because you do have a hell of a business journey.
Yes.
But what we're looking for today is the life journey.
Not a problem.
Mitali, if you could tell us the one answer to the question I ask all my guests: do you know how your mother and father met?
I do. Yes, I definitely do, because it was an arranged marriage. So it wasn't just me. The whole clan knew about it, of course. So yes, my dad there's an interesting story there, though. My dad had decided not to marry originally. He had very, very bad asthma. And this was back in the days when, so this will be the 1950s, 1960s.
Yes.
And asthma at the time, it was much more debilitating than it is now. I mean, the drugs, the inhalers are a lot better now. So he was so bad that he felt, I'm quite proud of him actually, because he came from a culture where men expect to get married regardless of their condition. And if they're unwell, they expect to get married for the woman to be a nursemaid to him, essentially. He actually was quite forward thinking, and he didn't want that in a wife. He thought that would be, he'd be taking a young woman's life and not being the best husband that he could be. So he decided a long time ago that he wasn't going to get married. And then in his 40s, the asthma started to improve with different medications that he was on. And he decided well into his 40s that he would like to marry. And then he heard about this family based in London. He met my older aunt. It's my mother's older sister. And she was the one who arranged the marriage. She said, I've got a wonderful younger sister. She lives in India at the moment. Come over to India. You can meet her. If you like her, let's do this. And that's how it happened. Wow,
beautiful. And this isn't part of what we were going to do, but the first question that came up was there something in your father's background that made him step away from the normal culture? Would that sum up who your father was or is?
I believe so. It's very difficult to say, Ernie. Let me tell you something about what happened in India. So my dad lived through the Partition of India.
Yeah.
And my mother lived through the formation of Bangladesh, the next big crisis in that region of the world.
Yes.
So they lived through two very different but equally harrowing parts of history in that Indian subcontinent. And I don't think this is a very Indian thing. I think this is a very human thing. We tend to minimize horrors. We tend to not want to talk about them or give them voice. And I always found it interesting that my mother called the formation of Bangladesh, she would use a word to describe it called Gondogul. Now, Gondogul means, in Bengali, it just means a bit of a faff, a bit of a do.
Yeah.
So when she would tell me about Gondoguls, and my dad would also use the word to explain the partition of India, in my head growing up, I genuinely thought it was just Hindus on one side, Muslims on one side, on the other side, just having a bit of a do, just really not liking each other. Crosswords were exchanged, land was divided. There you go. As a child, I had no understanding, no concept of what real war was.
Yes.
I think my first understanding of what war could be and the horrors of war was as a teenager. I remember the breakup of Yugoslavia. And then you had, do you remember that, Ernie? And then Bosnia was invaded by Serbia. And I was, at the time, I was about 13 years old, and I was old enough now. And I remember just being horrified and understanding this is what war is.
Yeah.
And then suddenly seeing what my parents went through, my dad with the partition of India and my mother with the formation of Bangladesh, they never spoke about it. So it's very difficult for me to answer your question, but I think it's because they never, I mean, my dad went to his grave, never really discussing or telling me, not wanting to tell me about some of the things that he saw. But I do know he was orphaned from a very young age. And I know his older sister, much older sister, brought him up.
Yes.
Educated him, managed to get him over to England to give him a better life. And then she died quite early on as well. So he was left with nobody after that. So I suspect it would have changed his view.
Yes.
He would have seen the hardship that his sister went through looking after him.
Yes.
And I suspect he didn't want to be a burden on another woman, which is why he made that decision when he had this really bad asthma that he didn't want to get married. But I'm making assumptions. I have to be honest with you. I'm making assumptions.
Of course.
I don't actually know. And my mother's still alive and still doesn't tell me anything about all the horrors that she saw when Bangladesh was formed. They come from a culture, and I would say a generation that just did the whole stiff upper lip thing. You don't talk about stuff like that. So they never did.
No, wonderful. Thank you for being so open on that. Really, really decisive. So if we can go from the years 1 to 10, a story, Mitali, that still makes an impression maybe on you.
Gosh, so there's so many. Well, I'll let you choose, Ernie. I'll let you choose. So I've got two, and you can choose which one you want to hear. So one is, I'd say, quite a fundamental story as to why I do what I do now.
Yes.
However, I'm going to be honest with you, I don't remember it. I only remember my mother telling me about this.
Right.
And then the other story I have is a recurring dream that I had. And I kept having it till I was 8 or 9 years old, from the age of about 3 or 4. So you take your pick. Which one would you like to hear?
Take the second one, the dream.
The dream. Okay. So the very first time I had this dream, I think I was 3 or 4. And I dreamt that my brother was not really my brother. He was an imposter. My real brother had been kidnapped somehow. And this clone of a brother had been implanted into my home. And you know, when you have those, we'll have these, even as adults, we'll have these dreams where you feel like your voice gets stuck in your throat. You can't, and it's one of those frustrating nightmares where you just can't, whatever you want to do, whatever you want to say, you can't do. You just can't, you're like, and you wake up like this as well. You know? It was one of those dreams where I'm screaming and shouting at my family, my parents, my sister, and saying, no, this is not Anupam. This is not my brother. I'm telling you, this is a clone of my brother. Some evil forces put a clone of my brother into. And I would wake up at the point where I would be trying to stuff my clone brother into the dustbin.
Right.
Hoping that I can get rid of him that way and the family will throw the bin out without checking what's in the bin. Now, it sounds quite funny now as an adult, but this is actually a nightmare. I would wake up screaming. I'd wake up crying. I'd want to go and see my brother to make sure that it was the correct brother. But when I woke up, I'd realize, I don't know in the dream why I thought this brother wasn't the real brother. But it's something I still don't really know why I dreamt that. And it was a recurring dream until I was about 8 or 9 years old. Right.
Interesting. And I do understand. I have them myself where you literally, you try, although you were asleep, you were trying to get out or to sit and you couldn't. And
Yeah,
I've been there,
it
so
was horrible.
absolutely. What do you think you got from that? Was there any? Would you say there's a lesson?
Ah, I think the lesson is from a very early age, I began to
Yeah,
distrust what I see. You know,
right,
and people always say, I don't know, I just started to, I had various other dreams when I was growing up, which all seemed to be about things to do with human beings tampering with nature. So
right,
it's interesting. I've always, from a very early age, I was dreaming things about clones. I was dreaming things about genetic engineering
right.
and the horrors. I remember one very vivid dream where I was on the Tyne Bridge. I live in Gateshead, so you've got the
Yes,
Tyne Bridge that connects Gateshead to
yes.
Newcastle. It's a very famous bridge, and I'm stood on it, and there's no one there. It's very early in the morning. It's just me, and then I can see a boat with two fishermen
Uh-huh.
on the Tyne, and they're just fishing, and then I can see seagulls in the sky, which is very normal in Newcastle. We're very
Absolutely.
very close to
Yeah,
the coast.
yeah.
But again, I start screaming. I want to scream at these fishermen to tell them something. I don't know what, but I'm scared for their lives. But they can't hear me. You know, when you can't scream in your dream,
Yeah.
it just sticks in your throat. And these seagulls getting closer and closer, and they're just seagulls. I'm not really sure what I'm terrified about. And then it's only when they're very close to I realize they're a hybrid of sharks and seagulls.
Ah,
So it's a
ah.
shark seagull, and I watched them swoop down on the fishermen and eat them alive. I think I was only about 5 when I saw that.
Mitali, are you
I'm
sure you want to stick to how-to books? Because
I'm thinking I need a
you've got the writer's mind.
I should write. Well, my thing, Ernie, if ever I've got an hour spare or an evening, I do watch a lot of science fiction and things like
Yes,
that. But it's interesting that I was dreaming those things before I started
absolutely,
watching science fiction films. So I wonder,
absolutely.
where was I getting this? Where was it coming from? Where's the input there? It would almost
Fascinating.
make sense if my parents, for example, were watching a lot of sci-fi when I was very young and don't remember,
Yeah,
then it would make sense as some of those images may have been going into my brain.
sure.
But my
But
parents have shown me they never watched anything like
no,
that when I was
no,
very, very young. So I'm not
that's
really sure where these ideas were coming from.
part of
But
you, Charlie. Yeah.
yeah,
So,
it's
if we
interesting.
can jump from 11 to 20, your teenage years, perhaps one or even two stories, because to me, that's a vital period of time
Yes,
where it
yes.
can really shape how you're going to be. So, one or two stories and the lessons.
Okay. I would say in my early teens, I was very unhappy, really, really unhappy. I know this is no reason, but I wasn't, it's horrible to say this, but you know how sometimes you look at some children and you wonder, why I don't understand why this child, I mean, no child should be bullied.
No,
But with some children, you can understand it. They're overweight, or
yes,
they look a bit odd, and like I said, that I never ever want to say that any child should, or any
no,
adult really should be bullied. But there's other kids you look at and you go, I don't get it. That kid looks as normal as the
yeah,
next kid. Why are they? I was the kid that you looked at and thought, yeah, I can see why she's bullied. I was
right,
very, very overweight. I had really, really bad acne.
yes,
And like I said, those are not reasons to be bullied ever.
no,
But you
no,
kind of look to me and you can understand. So yeah, I was alone. I didn't really have any friends growing up, and I kind of retreated into my writing and
uh-huh,
telling stories and that kind of thing. But the lesson really is that, if you don't fit in, don't keep trying to fit in, just find something that you're good at.
great,
But
yeah,
because of that, and because I retreated into my writing and my
yes,
reading and into my own thoughts, I ended up winning a scholarship to go to a summer school in Edinburgh for a month.
right,
And with me, there was 5 other children, and we actually co-wrote an episode of Brookside,
yes,
which was the first thing that I did that I really saw up in lights. And that gave me the impetus to say,
great,
up until that point, writing and reading was just something I did for fun.
Yeah.
I was actually set for a career in medicine. I know
Right.
I'm a walking, talking stereotype. Any educated Indian woman, of course, she's going to be a doctor.
Yeah.
So I was going to go down that path. And it was only after that time in that summer school and then seeing that episode of Brookside going, oh
Yes.
my God, I had a part to play in writing this
Brilliant.
episode. That's what made me think, yeah, I want to do something within writing.
Yeah. And
That's what I want to do.
brings up a question again from those two stories, from sort of up to 8, 10, and then 13, 14, 15. What were you like at school? Or how did you like school? Did you hate school?
I loved school from an academic point of view. I really enjoyed the learning process. I'm one of these people that if somebody would pay me just to learn for the rest of my life, I would do that. I'd be that annoying person that has all the, well, I was just about to say all the letters after my name, but I've already got so many letters after my name.
Yeah.
But I would still happy to have even more letters after my name. I would happily just learn for the sake of learning because I really have a voracious appetite to learn. But unfortunately, this is how it should be, the world should be. You should actually contribute to society. Just learning and not contributing something.
No.
It makes sense. I mean, really, I'm being very selfish to expect the world to keep paying for me to just keep learning. I do have to contribute, but that would be my ideal. So I loved it. I love school from that point of view, but I didn't enjoy it because I felt alone. I was, I would say, mildly bullied. I was lucky in that my dad put me into a private school when I was 11.
Right.
It was a very small school, so they really looked after me and made sure things didn't get out of hand. I'm sure the bullying would have been a ton worse if I was in a big
comprehensive
thing. Big state school. Back then, I don't know if you remember, Ernie, back then it was normal to have classes where there were 50 plus students. There's absolutely no way for a teacher to keep an eye on that many kids, you know. So I'm sure things would have been a lot worse for me if I wasn't in a private school.
Would that have been in the 80s or 70s or 80s?
This is 80. So I was in a state primary school till 89, and from 1989 I was in a private school. So as a teenager, I was in a private school.
If I can contribute a little bit there, Mitali, because during the 80s, I was taken on as a supply teacher.
Oh, okay.
I'd had no teacher training, but when I was at college, I'd had a group of sixth formers. I was doing a graduation course for sports therapy, and a group of sixth formers came from the local comprehensive school, and they were with me for 6 weeks, once a week, to try and get them to learn the basics of putting on a sports class.
Oh, okay.
And then at the end of it, they told me that their sports teacher had just been suspended for smacking a pupil. So they recommended, the school asked me if I'd go and just finish off the term as a supply teacher. And they said, at the end of it, they said, look, we want to keep you on because you seem to be able to get some work out of the lower streams. Whereas teachers, as soon as a teacher comes in, the lower streams kick off.
Yeah.
And so I did about 7 or 8 years as a supply teacher with no teacher training. Wow. And when I started, it was brilliant. I'd come home to my partner and say, it's been great. You know, there's 1 or 2 kids who were a bit unruly. When I finished in the 1990s, I'd come home and say, there's 2 kids who were doing really well, but the rest of the class, it's a jungle. Wow. And that's how it had changed in 9 years. And as the classes got bigger, the bigger the jungle got.
Yeah.
The harder
it was a crisis. I really felt it was crisis point sort of around late 80s, early. I think from what I can tell, it's a lot better now. Right. But yeah, it was terrible. Yeah. So I think my dad saw that and he wanted me moved into a private school.
Yeah.
Where the classes were a lot smaller.
So is there a story of maybe later teens, 18, 19, 20?
Oh God, so there's huge stories there. So that was the time when things kind of fell apart for me. So I left school with great A levels. I got into Manchester University to study a media studies degree. And I think Well, it's because of it's not my parents' fault, but they did wrap me up in cotton
Yeah.
wool, which is understandable. I'm the first. So your parents kind of they're usually the most strict with the first child.
Yeah.
But also you have to remember, even if they weren't strict, what was I going to do? I didn't have any friends. I was a loner. So it
Right.
wasn't like I could go off the rails anyway. And then when I went to Manchester, I did just go off the rails spectacularly.
Yes.
So within a few months of me being at Manchester University, I ended up with an addiction to amphetamines and ecstasy.
Right.
So I was just partying all the time and not going to classes, which meant that I lost my place. I lost my accommodation as well, because I was linked to my university. And I ended up in a homeless shelter for about a year. So yeah, that was a real turning point for me. Really, really changed how I see life. And, especially someone who'd gone from quite a good, I would say we come from working class background, but we kind of pulled ourselves up to middle class level.
Yes.
Certainly with me at private school, I don't think you can call me working class, so I'm going to a private school. And this belief back then and still pervades now that people like me, that sort of thing shouldn't happen to.
Right.
And yet it does. It can happen to anybody.
Absolutely.
Really,
And I would venture that your experiences then, they may even have even contributed to maybe later in life.
It's completely changed. It's completely changed how I feel. Yeah, it's made me resilient, and also I think compassionate.
Right.
I think a lot of people, I might annoy a few people here, but a lot of people pay lip service when it comes to being compassionate about the homeless, compassionate about addiction, that kind of thing. It really is lip service. A lot of people really don't, and I'll have to count myself as one of those people until I was in that situation.
Right.
And I saw how people it's almost like, I almost think of it as you come into the system and the system itself is so flawed that things can get worse for you within that system. I was lucky because I managed to get assigned a really good team of coaches and therapists and mentors.
Right.
I think mainly, because I was female, so women are usually given better treatment if they're homeless than men are.
Right.
And secondly, it was actually my ethnicity. I think almost there was an element of they felt they needed to help me because it was so unusual to have an Indian girl who was homeless. In fact, I don't think I met any other Indian girl that was homeless, so I think for that reason, it sort of like the inverse of racism. If that was it counted for me for once. My race counted for me. But that made me. It upset me as well because I met these amazing women and men who are on the streets for no fault of their own. They're just the perfect storm. A lot of people think they're years and years away from homelessness. The average person in the UK, I found out recently from Shelter, the average person in the UK is about 4 to 6 months away from homelessness. All they literally need is to be made redundant and they don't get another job. And, and most people only have savings to last about 4 to 6 months.
That's right.
So if you don't sort yourself out, you could easily be on the street in less than a year.
Yeah.
So it really informed me, and I grew up, that was a really formative experience, and I grew up having so much more compassion for people on the streets, compassion for working girls. A lot of the girls who were in the shelter with me were selling themselves to pay for a habit and that kind of thing, and just having so much more compassion for these people instead of just seeing them as just these people who are down and out.
Did that take you into your 20s, Mitali, and is there a story between 20 and 30?
Between 20 and 30 I actually had a really, really good time. So I got myself clean. I got back into university, got first, ended up doing a master's at London School of Journalism, did really well on that. And for the first few years of my 20s, I was working as a freelance journalist for a number of different papers and magazines in the northeast of England. So that was a really, really happy point in my life. But then, what happy points are like, they never last. So so I ended up, this will take me into 2001, 2002. So if you cast your mind back then, Ernie, that was the time when there was this thing called new media. We now call it the internet. Right. It was called new media back then. And there was huge panic in the print world that, you know, no one will want to read newspapers and magazines anymore. So lots of journalists lost their job.
Yes.
Something I'm still bitter about even to this day, because there's now all this talk about fake news, and you know, people get their news from Facebook, and it's like, well, who's verifying that? You know, anybody can stick something on Facebook.
Absolutely.
And if a lot of people say, oh, it's fake news, but I can't speak for other countries, but certainly in this country, I believe you can trace it back to 2001, 2002, and what editors up and down the country did. They made a huge mistake. Yeah. Instead of realizing that all that was happening was that people were changing the medium that they're consuming news, but they still want news.
Yes.
They still want entertainment. They still want to know where to go to eat, what's happening in other countries, what to wear. They still want all that information, but they're just consuming it in a different format. That's all it was. Yeah. And because editors were so short-sighted, it meant they let lots of journalists like me go, which then created this vacuum, which was then filled in by all of these people who are not journalists.
Journalists, absolutely.
Who do not know how to verify facts, who don't even care whether something is factual before they put it on there. And that's why we have this dearth of fake news now, and people who are being influenced by stuff that is not verified.
Yes.
You know, and it's something that still upsets me now, because I think they really, if you can trace back fake news to what happened in 2001 and 2002 in this country. Yeah. But anyway, I'll get off my soapbox now.
Not at all, because you know, because that is right at this moment. It's having a profound effect on our lives, because we don't know who to trust.
Huge effect. Like I said, I can't speak for the USA. I can't speak for other parts of Europe. I don't know. But in the UK, I genuinely believe the reason we have so much fake news now is because we lost a generation of journalists over 20 years ago. Absolutely. And if the editors just understood that we still need these people, we just need a change. People are just going to go online and read something instead of. But anyway, they didn't change, and that's why we have so many issues now. So what ended up happening with me going into, so this is in my 20s, I had the first 4 or 5 years, fantastic, some of the best of my life, doing what I was meant to do, which is right. Yeah. And then the final 20s, not so great at all. So I was in a relationship with a guy who I'd become clean. He was clean for a while, but with some addicts, it's a lifelong. I've been able to stay clean for over 20 years. He had a much harder time staying clean. So he would sometimes relapse. That would bring on his schizophrenia. So he had drug onset schizophrenia. Yeah. So he ended up becoming arrested because he was loitering somewhere and behaving very strangely. And then he was sectioned under the Mental Health Act. Which was very tough on me because, you know, I conducted for the 3-year relationship, nearly 2 years of the relationship, he was incarcerated, and I was conducting a relationship with somebody who I could only see for 2 hours every week. Yes. And had to get a visiting order to see. So, yeah, that wasn't good. And then I lost my father when I was 29, which also had a huge impact on me. It made me leave Manchester and come and live in the northeast of England, which is where I still am now. So that had a huge effect on me, losing my dad.
Yeah. Wonderful. Thank you for that. So we go into 30 to 40. And
so that was a decade where I really started to understand who I am. Yeah. I think you kind of muddle through your teens and your 20s, and you do a lot of fronting. There's a lot of, I know who I am.
Absolutely.
You don't really have a clue who you are. I think in my 30s, I had a lot of guilt. I'm not really sure why. I think I felt losing my dad really affected me. And I know that he dearly wanted me to be a doctor of some sort. Right. Typical Asian dad, wants his daughter to be a doctor. Yeah. And at this point, it had been several years. I'd just been doing whatever jobs came. Because all the journalists were let go, there was no way I could see to get back into that industry. And I didn't really know what to do, Ernie. So I was just doing whatever jobs that came about. I'd actually fallen into recruitment because I found that I was quite good at it. It was never really a burning ambition of mine to be a recruitment consultant, but I found that I was good at it. I made good money, so I thought I'll stick with it. And then losing my dad, it actually made me think, well, why not give it a go? Why not try to be a doctor? So I decided, because I was trying to work out, well, there's so many different kinds of doctors, which one do I do? But because of my experiences with my ex, Rick, who had been incarcerated, there was so much that was great about the NHS and what they were doing within mental health. There's so much that was wrong as well. I really, really didn't like their use of ECT on him. I think that it's still, there's not enough evidence, still isn't enough evidence that putting electricity through somebody actually helps their brain whatsoever. But I was overruled, and they did do that treatment on him, which was one of the most horrible things I've ever had to, I'm sure far worse for him, but standing by and knowing something like that was happening to him and not being able to stop it. So I decided that if I was going to get into medicine, I would like to be a psychologist, a clinical psychologist working for the NHS. So in my 30s, most of it I spent working in psychiatric wards. So I spent a good chunk of it working in various hospitals in the northeast of England. So St. Nicholas Hospital, the Freeman, a number of different, working in psychiatric wards. And I even worked in a prison for 6 months as well. So that was an incredible experience. I was assaulted twice. So a lot of people say, wow, and you still didn't want to leave. I don't know. There was something about working. And again, some people will disagree with this, but I genuinely believe prisoners and mental health patients are the most misunderstood, and they are the lowest rung in society. A lot of people think of children and things like that, and it's like children always get sympathy. That if you go to any charities, the ones that may get the most donations are children's charities, followed by animal charities. As soon as you have any charities for prisoners, it just drops.
I don't know of any.
It just drops, and I think it's ridiculous. There's this belief that, do you remember, this is a number of years ago, do you remember the case about baby P?
Yes.
And it was a horrific case. I won't go into the details because it still makes my stomach want to just throw my breakfast up, and I'd like to keep my breakfast down today. But a horrific story about this little boy who was just horribly abused by his parents, and the failings of the social services because they'd visited him several times but didn't pick up that this boy was being abused, and he died in the care of his parents when really social services should have removed him from the parents and taken him to safety. And there was this huge, do you remember, a nationwide outpouring of people saying, oh my God, this is terrible, and et cetera, which is understandable, it should be. But I remember at the time thinking this boy was living in, I'm not making any excuses for his parents. No parents, it's disgusting, human beings who think they can do that to a child. But they hadn't had the best start in life themselves. They didn't have a lot of money. They didn't have jobs. They're pretty much falling through the net of society as well. Not that makes an excuse for what they did to the poor boy, of course. But I was just thinking, this boy, I think, was 4 or 5 years old when he died. If he were just a little bit older, say he was 11, 12, I'm pretty sure he'd be one of those teenage hoodlums that you see loitering. And then if he'd ended up in a young offenders institute, there'd be like no sympathy for him. And I just thought, isn't that interesting? Under 10, oh, poor little boy. But if you just got to the age of 10, 11, 12, and he died in a youth offenders institute, something like that, society at a whole, in fact, it wouldn't even make the news. It would have been like, well,
That's right.
And that's the reality. That is the reality that we get. We feel sorry whenever we hear stories of children being abused. And we have to remember, these children, the ones who don't die, they grow up. Why do they still not get any sympathy? They don't. It's something like we somehow stop the sympathy. As soon as they hit their teens, it's kind of like, no, we should just let them get on with it.
I'd like to go back a little bit, Mitali, because I found it interesting that you said that you decided you wanted to go into the psychiatric side of NHS, and then you started to tell us about what you were doing once you qualified. Was it easy to qualify?
No, I never qualified early. So I did this will be about 4 years.
Right.
So what I was doing was I couldn't afford to just study my degree.
Right.
So what I decided to, because remember, this is now going to be my second bachelor's degree. So the government are not going to come and help you to do a second bachelor's degree. So I had to pay my own way. So I decided to do my degree over 5 years instead of 3. So do it part-time. And then I would work in psychiatric wards part-time as well, partly for the job, for the money really, but also because that allows me to get a bit of experience in my chosen field. So I was hell-bent on becoming a clinical psychologist, and the first 3 years I really, really enjoyed. And then what ended up happening was the new government came in. This was the coalition government. Conservative and Lib Dems, I'm sure you remember. And all the funding, again, what I was talking about, when it comes to charities, even on the NHS, when it comes to mental health, bottom of the pile. The ones that get all the accolades, the cancer centers, they do really well when it comes to funding, whether it's charity or whether it's from the government. But when it comes to mental health, bottom of the pile, no one seems to really want to talk about it or care about it. And that's why I find it heartening now in the last few years, there's more and more talk about mental health. And,
there is.
And especially the pandemic has really brought it to the fore. And I think it's wonderful. Hopefully it won't go back into the shadows again. But because of all the funding cuts that were happening, this is going back to 2012, 2013. I don't remember this. I don't remember this. My mother tells me that she came into my room one day and I was just in a bit of a trance, just rocking back and forth. And it put the fear of God into her. So she kind of left the room. I don't remember any of this. I think I must have had some sort of break or something was going on. I don't remember. I don't have any recollection. A day or two later, she just took me to one side and just said, I was so proud of the fact that you really want to do medicine now and that you're honoring your dad's memory. But I'm actually asking you now to give it up. I don't think it's for you. I was so proud of the idea of my daughter being somebody who's able to help people with mental health issues, but I'm now worried that you're going to have mental health issues.
Absolutely.
And the reason why was because of the cuts. We were actually, now the final year was one of the most horrific years of my life, because we were letting people out of hospital that we shouldn't even be letting out because we needed the beds. Because it was so bad. We were just discharging people. Knowing that they were going to self-harm, knowing that they're not well, and we're just letting them back out into society. But that's literally, there's nothing else we could do. And it was affecting my mental health. So I had to leave. When my mother told me that, I knew that was it for me. I was done. So I had to leave.
And I think does that bring us on to the final decade of your life? So where you've gone from there, from the end of the 40s to where you are now. And
so
what's that story?
This last decade coming into my 40s has been the best yet. You know, what's that old saying, Ernie? Youth is wasted on the young. It really, really is. It really is. So, I was at rock bottom again at this stage. My second chosen career was now in the doldrums. I didn't know how to get back into it. I was back to just working any jobs that I can get just to make money. I was working in call centers, which is horrible anyway. I was working for a bank at a time, and I mean, the bank was fantastic, the people were fantastic, but it just wasn't what I wanted to do in my life. And then, as luck would have it, an old friend from Manchester got in touch with me and started. He has a business. He's an owner of a company that does search engine optimization for various other businesses. He does very well from it. And he started telling me about this new Google algorithm update. And I'm like, why you tell me this? I'm not technically minded. I don't really care what Google does, as long as it serves me, as long as it does what I want to do. When I want to find a hairdresser, it will find me a good hairdresser. That's all I care about. Why are you talking to me about algorithms and updates? What's that got to do with me? And he said, no, Mitali, just listen to me. This is important. There's a new update, and it means that now website owners can't just hire writers from Eastern Europe or Southeast Asia to write these articles which are barely legible, because it didn't matter, because all that mattered then was just having the right keywords. Now Google's bringing in this new update, and now they're going to measure how long somebody is on the website reading the article, reading the blog post, which means now they need someone like you. They need someone who's actually a decent writer, who's not just going to stuff keywords into a blog post, but actually write something that's entertaining and engaging. And that was the catalyst I needed to set up my very first business, which was a content writing business. And I started writing articles and blog posts for different websites around the world. Then from that, I ended up moving into copywriting, because there's more money in it. I'm sure you're aware of this, Ernie, being a great copywriter as well. So there was more money in copywriting. So I learned copywriting, and I started getting copywriting gigs. And then one of my very first copywriting clients took a punt on me and said, hey, I'd like to write a book, but I'm not very good at all that. Do you fancy writing a book for me? And I thought, I've never written one before, but if you believe in me, then let's go for it. So I wrote my first book, and that started my career as a ghostwriter. So it's just been one thing after another. It's been an absolute roller coaster. Absolutely. But I honestly have to say, hand on heart, the best decade of my life. And it's getting even better. It carries on getting even better.
Absolutely. And I venture to add that it feels so much better because of the traumas you've had. The down, you've heard the other side, you've seen the other side of life.
Yes. And also, the other thing I would say, Ernie, is I've never been a believer of fate, because I think fate is it's a lazy idea, because if you believe in fate, then you literally just have to turn up in your life. And then things will happen, and then you don't have the unction to just do something, you know. You just think, well, so I don't like the idea of fate for that reason. However, looking back on my life now, it's almost as if every single thing makes sense now, like why I did it. Even, you know, my mother sometimes say, well, what about, do you feel those years that you spent training to be a psychologist, do you feel those are wasted? I was like, no, because a lot of the psychology that I learned helped me in my copywriting. You know, as a copywriter, there's so much psychology behind the writing of copyright, and it's almost like there was some sort of master plan that I had. And yet I know deep down there was no master plan whatsoever. I was literally just living from one day to the next, just doing what my heart was telling me that was right, and that was it.
I was going to say, I was going to say that what I often talk about is that there have been many occasions in my life where I turned right instead of left. I left the building. I've got 2 daughters.
I know.
Because I left when I was leaving a college. An old school friend stopped me and we got talking. And so I missed my bus back to where I was living. So instead of that, I'd been invited to an end of term party. I went to the party, and one of the mature students who'd been in my class, we got talking. We got on really well. We got together and we had 2 daughters. Now, if that guy hadn't stopped me in the corridor, my daughters wouldn't have been born.
I know, it's crazy. And didn't I think you told me a story about how your father met your mother, and I think he was drunk and he bumped into her. Did he more? How romantic. Literally bowled over she was.
Again, if he decided to have another pint rather than go out, or if it had gone out a pint before, I wouldn't be here.
Exactly. It's incredible. Absolutely incredible.
And I think people should know that people should know that very often how your life is decided by a decision that you make.
Yeah.
And what I've learned is that, and it's only been really the last 10, 15 years, is that I'm here now because of the decision I made. It's my fault. It's my fault I'm here now.
I've heard you say that. I've heard you say that before. Yes, it's true. It's true. You know, you have to take responsibility where you are in your life, because you're only where you are today because of the steps that you took the day before and the day before that.
Yeah.
So really, you know, I remember someone telling me a while ago, which I've always loved. I think I was having one of those days when you're having a bit of a whinge, and you're having a bit of a pity party. So I must have been having a pity party a few years ago. This is a few years ago. And he just looked at me and said, Mitali, no one helicopters you into your life. No. And he just left it at that. And I thought, that's harsh, but true. But that's the point he made. Like, you haven't been helicoptered into your life and just dumped into your life. You can't whinge. You are here because of things that you did in the past. And if you don't like where you are now, guess what? You got to do something differently today. And then you'll be in a different place tomorrow. It sounds overly simplified, but it actually is
not at all, because I think you're living proof of that. So we're coming towards the end, Mitali. Thank you very much for being so open. And I think that's going to be a real lesson for the people who come on after, is to be open, to get the stories out of you. And so
I would say be honest with stories as well. Like, be honest. I've only really, I would say, in the last year or so started to speak openly about the fact that I was having addiction, that I was homeless, that I've had mental health issues myself. I've only been recently, and now I wish I can go back to my former self. I wish I can get like a DeLorean and go back in time. Speak to that young girl who was trying to front it out, trying to be perfect. And just say, people like you more when you show that you're broken. You don't have to try so hard to be perfect, because people actually don't like that. They really don't like that.
And I think we both know through 4N, which we're a member of, is that I've seen the people who've perhaps been the most successful, of the people who've been able, in their 18-minute or 20-minute foresight, been able to tell the crap that's happened to them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because it's become more powerful than all the successes that they've had.
Yeah.
So, that is my goal, is to get more people like yourself to open up and to tell the bad side, the crap side. Because it means you've survived.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Not only have you survived, you're thriving.
I am. I have to pinch myself, because I remember this time last year. Yeah, it was around this time last year. I had this harebrained idea. Well, I've now written 7 books as a ghostwriter. Why don't I teach people to write their own books? So that means I can help more people.
Yes.
And I remember loads of people saying, you're crazy. You're one of the few people who don't even need to pivot in this part. I hate that word, by the way. It was overused in 2020. But I was one of the few people that didn't even need to pivot, because guess what? As you'll notice as well, as a copywriter, Ernie, our business went through the roof last year because more people were indoors, which means they were consuming more content. So we were one of the few people who did well out of the pandemic.
Yes.
So there's literally no reason for me to move out of what I was doing and start teaching it. So everyone thought I was crazy. They were like, what are you doing? You're making even more money now. Just stick to what you're doing. But there was just something inside of me that said, no, I really, really want to do this. I really want to teach people to write their own books. And then I wrote my own book as well, which again was nerve-wracking. It's interesting, the journey from being a ghostwriter to an author.
Again, I don't want to keep it too long, because I want people to really see all of it. But you're bringing up so many ideas in me, in that you speak so well into the camera, you speak so well to a live audience, that I could almost see you being a storyteller. And when my venue closed last year, so there was no more storytelling, I thought that was the end of my career, my end of my venture. But then I found that there was the worldwide virtual storytelling guild in America, which meant that instead of me telling my stories to 25 people in Leamington, I was telling them to all over the world. And a lot of those storytellers were coming from the Asian continent. So I think that's something that you could maybe delve into as well, is to look at storytelling.
I'd love to, definitely.
We must leave it at that, I think, Mitali. Thank you very, very much. It's been spectacular. How do people get in touch with you?
Well, the best way is just to get to my website. So my book is called The Freedom Master Plan. You can just see it over my shoulder over there. And the website is called thefreedommasterplan.com. So if you just go over there, you find all the different ways to contact me, whether it's via email or social media. And you can also download a free sample chapter from the book.
Right.
So if you like it, then you can go and get it on Amazon.
Great. Don't go away straight after, Mitali. We'll have a couple of minutes chat, but thank you very much for all that you've told us, for being so open and just zoom away into the future. Thank you, Mitali. Take care, everyone. And
thank you.
The next No Story Stagnates will be later in the week.